For over 600 years, an object has held a secret that divides science and faith. Yante, Dirin, Guantoro, a piece of cloth that carries the ghost of unimaginable suffering. In its threads, the image of a tortured man, with wounds that seem to echo the most brutal descriptions of an event that changed the world forever. Are these the marks of Jesus of Nazareth, physical proof of the resurrection, or the most elaborate illusion in history, created by a genius who lived centuries ahead of his time? That is the question that brought me here. And that is why I decided to dive headfirst into this investigation. The Shroud of Turin is no ordinary story. It is a historical puzzle with missing pieces, a narrative of pain, but also of hope that stands the test of time. My goal here is not to convince you of anything. It is to present you with the evidence. I spent weeks reading scientific reports, studying medieval documents, and delving into theories that seem to defy logic itself. And what I discovered is that behind belief and skepticism, there is a mystery that invites us to go further. Get ready for a journey that will force you to question everything you know about history, science, and faith. What is imprinted on this fabric may be the key. But the question is, the key to what? For more than 600 years, an object has held a secret that divides science and faith. A piece of cloth that carries the ghost of unimaginable suffering. In its threads, the image of a tortured man, with wounds that seem to echo the most brutal descriptions of an event that changed the world forever. Are these the marks of Jesus of Nazareth, physical proof of the resurrection, or the most elaborate illusion in history, created by a genius who lived centuries ahead of his time? That is the question that brought me here, and that is why I decided to dive headfirst into this investigation. The Shroud of Turin is no ordinary story. It is a historical puzzle with missing pieces, a narrative of pain, but also of hope that stands the test of time. My goal here is not to convince you of anything. It is to present you with the evidence. I spent weeks reading scientific reports, studying medieval documents, and delving into theories that seem to defy logic itself. And what I have discovered is that behind belief and skepticism, there is a mystery that invites us to go further. Prepare yourself for a journey that will force you to question everything you know about history, science, and faith. What is imprinted on this fabric may be the key. But the question is, the key to what? The first thing that caught my attention about the shroud, besides the image, is the material. It is not just a piece of cloth. It is linen with a herringbone weave, known as a 3x1 specimen, which is a very sophisticated weaving method for the time. This type of linen was actually very common in the Middle East in the 1st century, which already gives us the first geographical clue. But what turned this artifact into a worldwide phenomenon was not its age, but its technology. In 1898, Italian lawyer and photographer Secondo Pia was given permission to photograph the fabric during an exhibition. The shroud was almost imperceptible to the naked eye, just a faint yellowish mark on an old cloth. Pia took the photos, but he didn't have high expectations. However, when he developed the photographic plate in his darkroom, he saw something that no one in over 600 years had noticed. The image of the man, which was a negative, appeared on the plate as a positive. For the first time, the faint shape of a body became a clear face, with features of pain, closed eyes, a beard, and long hair. Secondo Pia, for a moment, thought he was witnessing a miracle. That photo was not just a photograph. It was proof that the image on the shroud was not a painting, because if it were, its negative would be a blur. It was, in fact, a negative, which made it unique and impossible to create in an era without photography. The first thing that intrigued me about the history of the shroud is that for over 1,000 years, it simply disappears from history. There are no reliable records that clearly mention it between the death of Jesus and the 14th century. That alone is a big question mark. Some historians, however, have theorized that it could be the legendary image of Edessa, a cloth that, according to legend, bore the image of Jesus' face and disappeared during the Fourth Crusade. But these are just theories. The documented history of the shroud only really begins around 1353 in France. In the hands of a knight named Geoffroy de Charnay, he displayed it publicly, and this immediately caused controversy. A local bishop accused the shroud of being a painting of fraud. But even so, popular devotion grew. The shroud then began its journey through Europe, passing through the hands of nobles and the royal family of Savoy, who took it to Turin in 1578, where it remains to this day. But before that, something extremely important happened. In 1532, the shroud survived a fire in the chapel where it was kept in Chambéry. The fire melted the silver of the reliquary, and boiling water damaged the fabric. It was mended by nuns, the Poor Clares, who sewed the fabric to save it. And this is where our investigation takes a crucial turn, as this fire and the nuns' mending will become key pieces in the scientific controversy we will see later. In 1978, science had full access to the shroud for the first time. A team of 30 scientists, doctors, and historians, known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project (STURP), spent 120 hours analyzing the fabric. What they discovered was an avalanche of evidence that seemed to indicate that this was not a medieval object. The first major discovery was that the image was not paint. The team tested the fabric with X-rays and spectroscopy and confirmed that there was no pigment, dye, or any type of substance that could be applied with a brush. The image was a superficial oxidation of the fibers, as if a mysterious energy had burned the thinnest layer of the fabric. The second big surprise came from pollen analysis. Pollen grains were found from plants that only exist in the Jerusalem region, where the shroud is said to have come from. Which makes me wonder, how would a medieval forger have access to plants from the Middle East? But the most chilling discovery was the presence of human blood. Forensic analysis confirmed the presence of red blood cells, and more specifically blood type AB type body. The shape of the bloodstains was consistent with that of a body that had been wrapped in cloth and then removed. Scientists also noted that the wounds on the body, both from the nails and from the spear and scourge, were clinically accurate. They were not on the palms of the hands, as is commonly depicted, but on the wrists, which is the only place that could bear the weight of a crucified body. The STURP team had accumulated a mountain of evidence, but the final proof was missing: dating. In 1988, the Catholic Church finally allowed 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona to perform carbon-14 testing. This test is considered the gold standard for dating organic objects. The hope was that it would confirm the fabric's first-century origin. But what happened was the opposite. When the results were announced, the whole world stopped to listen. The 3 laboratories unanimously reached the same conclusion: the shroud dated from between 1260 and 1390. Science had spoken. The shroud, with all its aura of mystery, was nothing more than a medieval creation. The definitive proof of fraud seemed to have been found. For the scientific community, the case was closed. But for the defenders of the Shroud, the fight was just beginning. They pointed out flaws in the method. The strongest theory was that of biocontamination. They claimed that the samples for the test had been taken from an area damaged by the fire of 1532 and patched up by the Poor Clare nuns. According to this theory, the patches would have contaminated the sample with newer fibers, invalidating the result. The debate was more alive than ever. Carbon-14 dating ended the debate for many, but for others, it only deepened it. If the Shroud is, in fact, a medieval forgery, we are faced with a second mystery. Who created it, and how? Science has proven that the image is not a painting. There are no pigments. It has three-dimensional properties, a depth that could only be understood through photography. A medieval artist would have had to have a knowledge of forensic anatomy and photography that simply did not exist at the time. How could he have created a negative without knowing he was creating one? The technique used to form the image is still not fully understood, even by scientists. Several theories have emerged to explain the fraud, such as that the image was printed from a heated sculpture, or that it was created by rubbing pigment onto a fabric. But to this day, none of these theories has been able to convincingly replicate all the unique properties of the Shroud. The lack of an explanation for its creation is, for many, one of the strongest pieces of evidence in its favor. After all this investigation, the question continues to echo: what do you really believe? Is it an authentic relic that bears the marks of Jesus' DNA? Or a masterpiece by a medieval forger? Leave your opinion below. I really want to know what you think. And if you like mysteries like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next investigation. When I began researching the Shroud of Turin, I was looking for an answer. Was it real or a fraud? But in the end, I realized that what really matters is not the final answer, but the search for it. This cloth reminds us that history is full of mysteries that challenge us to go further. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me.